Welcome to First Downs, Fourth Downs, and Touchdowns. I'm here today to talk about the Week 8 Top 25 AP poll, and I'll be reacting to what I think on each ranking. So for number one is going to be the Georgia Bulldogs, and in this video I'm going to be going through a few stats, and then finally what games they kind of play and what I think about their ranking. So number one is the Georgia Bulldogs, 7-0. Georgia is still a good team. I can't say anything else because one, they're undefeated. Two, they kind of beat my team brutally, so I can't really say anything. But I think they're arguably the best team in the country. I think Ohio State, you could argue they could be number one right now, but I still think Georgia should have the number one spot. On average this season, they have 41.7 points per game on offense and 9.1 points per game allowed on defense. That's a stellar defense and stellar offense. Stetson Bennett this season has thrown for 7 touchdowns, which is 89th, and 1 interception, tied for second, while Kenny McIntosh has 53 attempts for 242 yards and 4 touchdowns. And they beat Vanderbilt 55-0 last week. On one hand, that's a blowout. On the other hand, it's Vanderbilt. So take it as you will. Notable games left are home games against Florida and number 3 Tennessee, as well as road games against number 19 Kentucky and Mississippi State. If I had to say anything else about their rankings, I mean, I'd keep them at number one, but I don't think they'll be number one in the next few weeks. But I'll get into that in a little bit. Number two, Ohio State Buckeyes, 7-0. Ohio State's a great team. I think they'll make the playoffs either way, unless they don't slip up somehow. Their offense is killer. Their defense is not the best, but it's still great. I like Ohio State right now. I really do. C.J. Stroud is obviously a Heisman favorite. He has 2,023 yards, 28 touchdowns, which is first, and 4 interceptions, which is tied for 41st. Mayan Williams has 9 touchdowns with 516 yards this season for 74 attempts, and the defense allows average 14.9 points per game this season, which is I can't find the rank on that, but 14.9 points per game is amazing. Notable games left this season are home games against number 4 Michigan, as well as road games, so decent point-scoring Maryland and number 13 Penn State. They just beat Iowa 54-10. If I had to say anything else, at the beginning of that game against Iowa, I was a tad worried, but then Ohio State came back and proved why they're number 2 in the country. I think they'll be making the playoffs. I like them at number 2, arguably number 1 right now. Number 3, Tennessee Volunteers, 7-0. I like Tennessee, and as I said, I was going to mention when I was talking about Georgia, I think Tennessee will upset Georgia, and I think they'll become the number 1 team in the country. I think they'll win the SEC East, SEC Championship, and make the college football playoff. It's a bold prediction, but then again, I said they'd beat Alabama, and a lot of people said they wouldn't. So I'm on the Tennessee hype train. Hendon Hooker is a Heisman favorite right now. He has 2,093 yards, 18 touchdowns, which is tied for 12th, and 1 interception, which is tied for second. If he continues to play at this level, I would say he could win the Heisman. Another player I want to talk about is their running back, Jabari Smalls. He has 89 attempts for 397 yards and 8 touchdowns. And their great running back combined with their killer pass game that has killed teams like Alabama, like we just saw recently, with players such as Jalen Hyatt, who had 5 touchdowns against Bama. On one hand, Bama's secondary is shaky, you could argue. I mean, obviously they are. But, I mean, on the other hand, it's Bama. And plus, a wide receiver typically doesn't have 5 touchdowns in a game. He has 40 receptions on the season for 769 yards and 12 touchdowns. Other notable receivers include Jaden Hazelwood and Cedric Tillman, who's still injured at the moment, but Josh Heupel recently said it is being taken day to day whether he'll play against Kentucky this week. They just came off a win against UT Martin, 65-24. It's a blowout, but honestly, I expected nothing less. Remaining notable games are a home game against number 19 Kentucky and road games against the number 1 Bulldogs and number 25 South Carolina Gamecocks. Man, it's weird to say number 25 with Carolina Gamecocks. I haven't seen them ranked in a while, but we'll get to that at the end. That's the final team, so I'll go on my rant in a while. If I had to say anything about the ranking, I like where they're at now. I think they're better than Michigan. Well, I mean, I think you could argue they're better than Michigan, especially with their who they played so far. But yeah, I don't see him at number 2. I don't see him at number 4. I like where they're at. Number 4, Michigan Wolverines, 7-0. I like Michigan. I think they're a sneaky good team. I think a lot of people expected them to be a one-year wonder last year to make the playoffs. I did too, I will admit. But they've definitely proved that Aiden Hutchinson wasn't the only reason that they were good. Michigan has been unstoppable with their run game, and their defense has been absolutely dominating games. Blake Corum has 146 attempts for 901 yards and 13 touchdowns in this season. He is an absolute monster. He had 166 yards and 2 touchdowns against number 10 Penn State. And last time I checked before that game, the one thing they talked about with Penn State was their run defense. Yeah, they got exposed. But anyways, J.J. McCarthy had thrown 9 touchdowns this season for 2 interceptions for 1,297 yards, and Michigan's defense only allows 12.1 points per game, which is 3rd place in FBS. Their defense has players such as Junior Colson, linebacker, of 49 tackles, Michael Barrett, linebacker, with 31 tackles and 2.5 sacks, and Rod Moore, who is a defensive back with 2 interceptions this year. They had a bye week this week to prepare for a spiraling Michigan State. On one hand, Michigan State is definitely troublesome, but on the other hand, I still think Michigan State. It's a rivalry game. I've seen clips of crazier things happening. Notable games left this season include home games, hosting number 17 Illinois, and a rivalry game against Michigan State, just like I mentioned, and a tough road game against number 2 Ohio State in Columbus. I like their ranking. I think number 4 is a good spot. I think right now they'd make the college football playoffs, definitely. Of course they would, but I like where they're at now. I don't have anything to say about it. Number 5, Clemson Tigers. Let me just take a sip of water before I even talk about them. Man, Clemson Tigers 8-0. Thoughts on Clemson for me? Well, as you can see by this jersey, you already know what I think about them. It was terrible. That Clemson has allowed, I'll just get to the stats. Clemson has allowed 21 points per game this season, which is 21st. And DJ Ukulele struggled against Syracuse. And despite being improved from last year, he still has things he needs to work on. I think that game definitely proved it. His 2 interceptions against Syracuse were atrocious, and he fumbled the ball, leading to a whole momentum change in Syracuse touchdown. He was benched for freshman quarterback Cade Klubnik, who led a 17-point comeback win, and despite possible quarterback controversy like was projected at the beginning of the season, Dabo Swinney is still saying Ukulele's their starter. DJ's stats are 1,083 yards, 17 touchdowns, and 4 interceptions, and another player that is definitely better than the quarterbacks is their running back, Will Shipley. He is an absolute monster. I'm going to be scared when we have to deal with him this season. He's probably going to run the ball over us, but I'm going to try to be positive and say we have a chance. I'm going to try, but he is a scary dude. He'd run for 5 yards, assault the ground, like full on, beat his hand against the ground, mad that he didn't get the first down, and then run for like 15 yards the exact next play. But, yeah, he's scary. I believe he has 123 attempts this season for 739 yards and 10 touchdowns. And the one time you saw him fumble the ball against Syracuse was the first fumble of his entire college career. Just let that reverberate for a second. His first fumble of his entire career. I believe he's a sophomore this year. That's impressive. I don't know what to say. But I will say, though, Clemson, I don't think won that game the first half. I mean, on one hand, Syracuse did choke at the second half, but which I'll get to in a little while. But the refs really sided with Clemson. That quarterback roughing the passer, they called it for Clemson, but they didn't call it for Syracuse. That's terrible. The refs have always been with Clemson, in my opinion, like for the past 5 years. Clemson is still a good team, as you can see, based off of their rank, 8-0, or their record, sorry. But they are not what they used to be. Turns out Sunshine, Trevor Lawrence, my bad, was carrying that team for a long time. Once again, they just came off a win against Syracuse, 27-21. And notable games left are home games against Miami and number 25 South Carolina Gamecocks, as well as road games next week against Notre Dame. If I had to say something about the ranking, if you look in an empty vacuum, you can understand why they're number 5. But just from my perspective, they'd be top 10, but they would not be close to number 5 right now. But once again, call me biased, whatever. I understand. Number 6, the Alabama Crimson Tide, 7-1. They had a close, tough loss, number 3, Tennessee, 2 weeks ago. Man, I feel so bad for Mississippi State. They always play Bama when they come off a loss or a bye week after a loss. Like, they don't deserve it, man. They got slaughtered 30-6 at Bryant-Denny Stadium too. That's just, I feel bad for Mississippi State. This isn't fair. This isn't fair what we're doing to them. Alabama, despite the loss this season and them struggling this year, they're still Alabama. You put them up against anybody in the FBS, FCS, I don't care. They definitely have a great fighting chance to win that game. Alabama has been struggling this season, though, with close wins over Texas, 20-19. Texas A&M, which only won 24-20, as well as a loss against Tennessee. And Bryce Young, I'd like to talk about him. He's definitely played well. 1,906 yards for 18 touchdowns, which is tied for 12th, and 4 interceptions, which is tied for 23rd. But he won't have a Heisman repeat this year. You know, there were some hopes this year for a repeat, but I think only one person has repeated the Heisman. I honestly can't tell. I can't really look it up right now. But I know at least one dude has done it. But Bryce won't do it this year, I don't think. I just don't think he's playing on the same level as he did. It's hard to repeat the magic, I would say. Alabama's secondary is something I want to talk about real quickly. It's been a huge weak spot this year. Tennessee exposed that, if it wasn't already exposed. Their defensive backs just get burnt by wide receivers, usually after offensive turnovers, may I mention, which I talked about in the Bama versus Tennessee whenever they played Texas A&M. I figured there was a correlation between turnovers and secondary not playing well. Can I answer what the problem is? No, I can't, but hopefully Nick Saban can figure it out. They've only allowed 16.6 points per game on average this season, which is 7th in the 131 FBS teams. But one thing I'd like to talk about is throughout this season, penalties have decimated momentum. Like, terrible. That was the worst problem, in my opinion. But against Mississippi State, they only committed 2 penalties against Mississippi State, of course, for 20 yards, which is very good. That's a pretty, almost perfect disciplined team. One of them was a pass interference call, and the other one, I believe, was a false start on a 4th down where they were punting it either way. I don't remember, but yeah, Alabama's definitely become more disciplined the past game. Besides, you could point out like all the major flaws with Alabama, but one thing I think more than anything is just they need to play like they've played. They have the talent, they have the coaching, they have the fans, they have the atmosphere, they have the resources. They just need to play like Bama, high discipline, explosive offenses, tough and physical defenses. Alabama can still make the playoffs, but they would have to go undefeated for the rest of the season, win the SEC championship for sure. So, they're still in the playoff race, okay? People are getting comfortable saying they're out, but no, trust me, they're way in. Notable games left this season are a home game against rival Auburn, which I know they're terrible, but it's the Iron Bowl. You can never count anything out. And road games against number 18 LSU and 15 Mississippi. If I had to say anything about the ranking, I think number 6 is okay. I'd put them at number 7. Because I think TCU's been playing better than them this year. But then again, I understand why Bama's at number 6. So, personally, if I had to make a ranking, I would switch the TCU, which is up next, and Alabama. But I'm not going to start a riot over this. But anyways, like I mentioned, at number 7, TCU Horned Frogs, who are 7-0. They're an underrated team despite their record. I hear talk about TCU more, but it's definitely not as much as the rest of the top 10 based off of, like, just personally. It might just be me, but I still think they're an underrated team. Their defense has been allowing 28.3 points per game this season, which is 72nd. And TCU, let's just say they've caught the attention of people, even though I said that I still think they're underrated. But they had an annihilation of Oklahoma, followed by 3 top 25 wins in a row: Oklahoma State, Kansas State, and Kansas. If that's not a momentum swing throughout the season, I don't know what is. They're doing great. I mean, what else can you say? Quarterback Max Duggan has been playing great with 19 touchdowns, only 1 interception for a total of 1,871 yards. And other key players include running back Condre Miller with 731 yards, safety Mark Perry, 40 tackles, and cornerback Josh Newton, 2 interceptions. TCU is a playoff contender. If I ran 10 scenarios, I think at least 4 of them they would win. They'd make it in the playoffs. I think TCU they definitely have a shot if they just win out the rest of their season. Important games left this season, though, are home games against Iowa State and Texas Tech, as well as road games against Texas and Baylor. Final thoughts. I would argue they could be switched with Bama, but I think I like where they're at right now. Number 8, Oregon Ducks. Man, oh man, oh man! If this isn't the comeback team from week 1, I haven't seen. I don't know what is. Oregon. I like Dan Lanning. I think he's doing a great job for his first season. Man, they just flipped the tables. They were preseason top 10, got so beat by Georgia that they got kicked out of the top 25, and then here they are going 6-0 after that week 1 beatdown. Last week, though, was definitely a statement win against number 9 UCLA at the time, of course, 45-30. I don't think the score really shows what happened. I think Oregon dominated more than the score really shows. But Oregon's defense on average this season has allowed 31.5 points per game, which is 92nd. And this really shows their defense has room for improvement. Their passing defense definitely needs improvement, but their rushing defense has been playing pretty well. Oregon is still a serious Pac-12 title contender and could be in the playoff picture if the cards fall down in their favor. Bo Nix has been playing pretty well with 1,809 yards for 17 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. He's been playing good, but I mean, like, Pac-12 good. It is what it is. Take it as you will. Running back Sean Dollars has 157 yards for 1 touchdown for 23 attempts, while running back Bucky Irving has 536 yards for 2 touchdowns and 79 attempts. I really like these 2 running backs. I think they make a great combination. I think they're an underrated running back duo, but that's just my opinion. Notable games left this season are home games against Washington and number 14 Utah, as well as a road game at rival Oregon State. Final thoughts on the rankings. I think I don't know if I'd put him in the top 10. I think I'd put him at 10, honestly. If I'm just throwing numbers out there, these probably won't make sense if I went back and analyzed and made my own top 25, but I don't think I'd have him at number 8. But I mean, I won't start a riot over it. It's okay. Number 9, Oklahoma State Cowboys, 6-1. Oklahoma State is a great team, despite their 1 loss. I like head coach Mike Gundy. I don't know what to say. I just like Oklahoma State. They have around 44.7 points per game on average on offense, and defense is allowed around 28.7 points per game this season. Quarterback Spencer Sanders has had a great season so far with 2,030 yards for 15 touchdowns and 4 interceptions. That's crazy when I see stats like that. Like, I don't know. It's just like I see it as like 2030. That's like 10 years or 8 years ahead of 2022. I get like those 2,000 yards in like the year kind of like linked together. It's probably weird, but that's just the way I see it. Defense has key players like linebacker Mason Cobb with 61 tackles and safety Jason Taylor with 3 interceptions. And running back Dominic Richardson has 121 attempts for 451 yards and 8 touchdowns. Yeah. Wide receiver Bryson Green has 21 receptions for 417 yards and 5 touchdowns. I think this is a great offense. I think their defense is doing pretty good. There's definitely room for improvement. And Oklahoma State is still in the playoff picture, but they're going to have to win out the rest of their schedule, and their Big 12 title hopes are definitely still out there. They're coming off a 31-24 win against Texas, and I think notable games in this season are a home game against Iowa State, with road games against a collapsing rival Oklahoma, number 22 Kansas State, and unranked Kansas. I think I'd be more comfortable if I switch Oklahoma State and Oregon. I think that would make me more comfortable about both teams where their rankings are, but I don't really have too much of a problem with it. Okay, now we have two teams tied for 10th place this week, which is something a little peculiar if you ask me. And first, tied for 10 is the USC Trojans, 6-1. I like USC, definitely. I don't like Lincoln Riley, though. I just think he kind of got scared of joining the SEC, if you ask me. And then he kind of backstabbed Oklahoma. I think he was set at Oklahoma. I don't see why he would leave, but it is what it is. But he's definitely been finding success. I will not deny that. He averages around 40.4 offensive points per game this season, and their defense has only allowed 22.1 points per game, which is 32nd in the country. The offense is loaded with players such as quarterback Caleb Williams with 1,971 yards for 19 touchdowns, which is tied for 8th, and 1 interception, which is tied for 2nd. Wide receiver Jordan Addison has with 39 receptions for 585 yards and 7 touchdowns, and running back Travis Dye with 101 attempts, 647 yards and 7 touchdowns. I could probably go on, but I don't want to, have a whole paragraph on just player stats right now. Defense does have key players like linebacker Eric Gentry with 52 tackles and defensive back Mecky Blackman with 2 interceptions. They're coming off a loss, Utah 42-43. That's definitely a tough loss. It was a heartbreaker, absolutely heartbreaker. Utah came back. I think USC had many opportunities to win that game, but then they just didn't. Can't tell you why. I just don't think they. I just don't think they played well at the end. Notable games left include home games, hosting Notre Dame and number 12 UCLA, as well as a road game against Arizona next week. I think they're number 10 in the country. I'm okay with that. I like that. I expected them to be this good this year. I did not expect them to make the playoffs like I've seen quite a few people predict, but I definitely seen them being in the top 10, top 15. Now, the second team tied for number 10 is Wake Forest. Wake Forest Demon Deacons, 6-1. They were right there. They had the perfect opportunity, and they choked against Clemson. And they could have been the top of the ACC, but here we are now. Their offense averages 41 points per game, which is 8th. Their defense allows 26.3 points per game on average, which is 57th in the country. Sam Hartman was out for a while due to a blood clot, but thank the Lord he recovered and began to play at a great level. Despite whatever football team you're pulling for, just seeing a player have a condition like that just is scary. No matter if you're a rival of Wake Forest fan, or Washington State fan, and you have nothing to do with them. I'm just glad he got better. Sam Hartman came back, he played against Boston College after recovering from a blood clot, and threw for 313 yards and 5 touchdowns alone. That's crazy. And just to think he has 1,755 yards for 21 touchdowns, which is tied for 5th, and 3 interceptions, which is tied for 23rd, is absolutely crazy. He has these numbers after missing a few games due to a blood clot. That's just impressive. Wide receiver A.T. Perry has 32 receptions for 524 yards and 5 touchdowns. They're coming off a win, like I said, 45-13 at Boston College. And I think notable games in the rest of the season are including a stretch of 3 top 25 opponents, which has a road game to number 24 NC State, home game to number 21 North Carolina, and another home game against number 16 Syracuse. They definitely have a tough rest of the season schedule. These games will decide whether Wake Forest can make a New Year's Six bowl. Would I put them at number 10 right now? No, I think I'd put them. I don't know why. If it was me, I wouldn't have them tied for 10th. Wake Forest would be 11th or 12th, honestly. But it is what it is. The number 12 UCLA Bruins, 6-1. UCLA, I think they're underrated. I know they lost. Definitely, but I still think they're underrated, and I like them with Chip Kelly. Their offense averages around 39 points per game, which is 11th, and their defense averages 29 points per game, which is 74th. Quarterback Dorian Thompson-Robinson has 1,772 yards for 17 touchdowns and 3 interceptions, while running back Zach Charbonnet has 766 yards for 7 touchdowns on 107 attempts. Defense has a good linebacker group with linebackers such as Mo Osling, 50 tackles, John Vaughns, 2 interceptions and 34 tackles. I really like that linebacker duo right there. UCLA will need the win the rest of their season, not a single loss if they want to have their sights on a New Year's Six bowl. They're coming off a loss Oregon 30-45. Like I said, the score makes it look closer than it was in my opinion. But I still see UCLA as a top 15 team. Notable games left this season include home games number 10 USC and a Stanford that upset Notre Dame in South Bend, as well as road games to rival California and Arizona. I like where they're at number 12. I think you could switch them with Wake Forest and have Wake Forest be 12 and UCLA number 11. But I like UCLA right now. I still think they're a top 15 team. The number 13 Penn State Nittany Lions. They're 6-1. Penn State, I have a murky feeling about them because they just lost to Michigan, which exposed some problems. I believe. Let me look at the rest of their schedule. They still have to play Ohio State, which I think they'll lose. They have to play Maryland, which I think they could lose, and then they have Indiana and Rutgers. So I don't think they'll win out the rest of their season. I think they'll probably be a 2 or 3 loss team. But their offense averages 33.4 points per game, which is 28th. Their defense averages 18.9 points per game allowed, which is 14th. And after a brutal beating from Michigan, which I've talked about before, they bounced back and beat Minnesota 45-17. They definitely needed that win. It was more of a confidence booster, if you ask me. Not just for the team, but for the fans, for everybody to prove that Penn State's not. They're still a good team. But they're going to need a perfect game to have a chance to pull off the upset. And even then, they could play perfect, no penalties, no interceptions, no incomplete passes, and I still think they could lose. I just think Ohio State's that good right now. Quarterback Sean Clifford has thrown for 1,445 yards for 13 touchdowns and 3 interceptions this season, while running back Nicholas Singleton has ran for 561 yards for 7 touchdowns on 82 attempts. Safety Jair Brown leads the defense with 41 tackles and 3 interceptions. That's a pretty good safety, if you ask me. Wide receivers Parker Washington and Mitchell Tinsley both have over 300 reception yards for 5 touchdowns combined, and tight end Brenton Strange is 245 yards receiving for 4 touchdowns. That's a good tight end, if you ask me. I really like Brenton Strange. I think he's an underrated tight end. Penn State still has Big Ten title hopes, but they would have to win out, and Michigan would have to slip up somewhere. I think you could just sum it up the best way. Their destiny is not in their control with their conference title hopes. Important games. I already talked about Ohio State, Maryland. There's still Michigan State, Indiana, Rutgers, etc. 13. Do I think they'll stay 13? No, I think they'll eventually be maybe a top 20 team or somehow stay top 15. Could they make it New Year's 6? I think they could, but the chances, I don't know. I'm not the most positive on Penn State. I like Penn State, but I'm just not the most positive on them right now. Okay, number 14, Utah Utes, 5-2. I like Utah. I like their quarterback, Cameron Rising. I was heartbroken when they lost to Ohio State last year. The Rose Bowl, I think. I think it was a Rose Bowl. But, there we go. Their offense averages 35.3 points per game, which is 19th. Their defense averages 24.8 points per game, which is 51st. After a statement win over the Trojans, 43-42, which was a mighty close game. The Utes have a bye week to prepare for the next 4 very winnable games. This is Colorado, Stanford, Arizona, and Washington State. And this is all before a huge game against Oregon that will decide their Pac-12 title chances. Sorry, I'm getting a little out of breath. It's okay. Cameron Rising has thrown for 1,855 yards, for 15 touchdowns, which is tied for 33rd, and 3 interceptions, which is tied for 23rd. Running back Tavion Thomas has ran for 414 yards and 5 touchdowns on 93 attempts. Leading the receiving corps is tight end Dalton Kincaid, who has caught for 558 yards and 6 touchdowns with 39 receptions. Not far behind is wide receiver Devon Bailey, who has 32 receptions for 4 touchdowns and 418 yards. Defense is being led currently by players such as safety R.J. Hubert, 48 tackles and 2 interceptions, as well as cornerback Clark Phillips, 16 tackles and 5 interceptions. With Utah's win over USC, the chances of a Pac-12 team in the playoffs become murkier, definitely. But notable games left in the season include a home game against Stanford and road games against Washington State and Oregon. I am going to go back to the playoff thing. USC was their best chance there, I don't know. I know they were definitely above number 10 before they lost to Utah. I don't know the exact number. I can't tell you, but with Utah pulling off the heartbreaker upset for USC, I don't think there'll be a Pac-12 team in the national championship or the college football playoff in general. Utah, I like Utah. I think number 14 is a fine place for them. Nothing less, nothing more. Number 15, Ole Miss Rebels, 7-1. Lane Kiffin. Lane. The Lane train has stopped for now. Their strength of schedule was questioned before week 8. Ole Miss had been struggling with the notion that they were beat on many sides of the ball. After like a first quarter or two, they'd go score a ton of points and just completely stop for a while. This was proved against LSU, where they got dominated around 3/4 of the game in a 45-20 loss. Running back Zach Evans is trying to recover from a knee injury, and they will need him if they want to have a chance to be able to win all the games in a final stretch of the season. Offensive points per game this year is 35.3, which is 20th this season, as well as defensive points per game allowed is 23.3, which is 39th this season. Jackson Dart has thrown for 1,772 yards for 11 touchdowns and 7 interceptions. So I don't like that touchdown-to-interception ratio right there, but it is what it is. Freshman running back Quinshon Judkins has a big chip on his shoulders. Man, he has to be stressed all the time, with running back Zach Evans out, of course. But he's ran for 831 yards and 12 touchdowns. I think the wide receiver duo, Jonathan Mingo and Malik Heath, have caught for a combined total of 1,067 yards, 6 touchdowns, and 57 receptions. Key defensive players include linebacker Troy Brown, 60 tackles, and safety A.J. Finley, 55 tackles for 2 interceptions. They have a difficult next 4 games to decide their standings in the SEC West and hopefully New Year's Six bowl game. Well, they'll be hoping. I don't really like Ole Miss that much. This includes home games against number 6 Alabama and rival Mississippi State, as well as road games to Texas A&M next week in Arkansas. Do I think Ole Miss is the number 15 team in the country? Yes, I don't think their 6-0 start or 7-0 start was a fluke, but I don't know. I have a feeling they might collapse at the end of this year. Number 16, the Syracuse Orange. Man. If I had a team to be mad at this week, it'd be the Syracuse Orange. You were up by 11 points at halftime. 11 points. I don't remember who got the ball to begin with in the second quarter, but 11 points, man. You guys were playing on fire, but you choked. You absolutely choked. It's stupid, but it is what it is. Offensive points per game average is 29.7, which is 51st, while defensive points per game this year allowed has been 17.7, which is 10th. So it's been a pretty good defense, which kind of let up 17 points after Clemson came back with a freshman QB, but it's okay. Quarterback Garrett Schrader, I'm gonna rip into him for a second, but I will say he's been consistently good this year, and his run game, even against Clemson, was great. He choked in the final half And the pick at the end of the game, that's arguably one of the stupidest picks I think I've ever seen. He had 3 guys around him, and he decided to do that. It's so dumb. It's so dumb. But it is what it is. Running back Sean Tucker has been a beast, though, with 698 yards for 6 touchdowns. I think running back Sean Tucker has definitely made you worry about the read option with Schrader's dual threat ability, definitely. But defensive players have been holding down that 10th in defensive points per game allowed is linebacker Michael Jones, 52 tackles, linebacker Marlo Wax, 45 tackles, and defensive back Garrett Williams, 32 tackles and 2 interceptions. The refs helped Clemson win that game. I've seen multiple memes where it said the Clemson MVP was the refs, and I still believe that. I know I've already mentioned it, but I should just mention it again. The refs helped Clemson so much. But they should have extra motivation heading into next week's game against Notre Dame to prove that their 6-0 fluke. Sorry. Their 6-0 start was not a fluke. I still think they're a good team. I do not think they were a fluke. The ACC championship odds are very remote now, but a New Year's Six Bowl is still on the table if they go win out the rest of the games. Notable games heading into the rest of the season include home games against Notre Dame and Florida State, as well as road games against Pittsburgh and number 10 Wake Forest. I would have it Syracuse at number 16. I think they dropped the right amount of points. I don't see a problem with where they are. Whew. Number 17, Illinois Fighting Illinois, 6-1. I will say I did not see this coming at all. I couldn't tell you the Illinois quarterback or running back before this season, but now I can. Their defense has been exceptional in every way. However, you could say they haven't played any dynamic offenses yet. They'll have a test this week with a combo of Nebraska quarterback Casey Thompson and wide receiver Trey Palmer. Sorry, misspelled Thompson there. Running back Josh McCray is expected to play for the first time since the first game of the season, which should lighten the load for running back Chase Brown. But Brown, maybe they should keep starting him because he has a crazy 1,059 yards for only 4 touchdowns. But at the same time, 1,059 yards, I think he's the first running back and the only running back on this list in the top 25 to have 1,000 rushing yards. Offensive points per game, though, is 25.2, which is 80th, and their defensive points per game allowed is 10.3, which is first. So they definitely had a phenomenal defense, but we'll see this coming week. Quarterback Tommy DeVito has thrown for 1,415 yards for 10 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. You may look at the yards and see they're low, but I mean, when you have a running game like that, you can't really blame the quarterback there. Notable games coming up include an away game off a bye week next week against Nebraska, another away game to number 4 Michigan, which would be really crazy if they pulled off that upset, and home games to Purdue and Michigan State. If I had to guess right now, I think they win against Nebraska, win against Michigan State, but they lose to number 4 Michigan. And Purdue's been an upset team. I think we saw that last year. Are they doing as good this year? No, but I mean, I think Purdue always has a chance in a game. Number 18, though, the LSU Tigers, 6-2. I can tell you, this is another team I did not expect to be good this year. I'm surprised Brian Kelly and LSU are first in the SEC West and doing so well. I definitely thought Brian Kelly and his fake accent. Definitely thought they wouldn't be dominating as they have this year. Remember, they lost against Florida State. I don't remember who they lost to, the other team. Was it Mississippi? No. I can't tell you. But, man, 6-2. That's pretty good if you ask me. Pretty good. They're coming off a slaughter Ole Miss 45-20, where they dominated 3/4 of the game. But offensive points per game is 30.9, which is 44th, and their defensive points per game allowed is 21.7, which is 27th. Let's talk about quarterback Jaden Daniels. Ooh, I just look at these stats again. And it's just absolutely insane. Absolutely insane. It's just... Where's the volume thing on this? There we go. There's the volume. Sorry. He's accounted for 11 touchdowns in just the past 2 games. That's crazy. He's thrown for 1,812 yards, for 3 touchdowns and 1 interception, while leading the team in rushing with 524 yards for 9 touchdowns. Looking at these stats by itself, you could just say he's the Lamar Jackson of college football right now. But I'll talk about their defense for a second. They have a great linebacker core at LSU with players such as Harold Perkins Jr., 36 tackles, Greg Penn III, 38 tackles, and Micah Baskerville, 49 tackles and 1 interception. Next week game, hosting Alabama, went from an expected beatdown to now what is now a deciding game for first place in the SEC West. I'll definitely try to be watching that game. I don't know what time it is. Hold on. I'm actually curious now. Okay, there we go. It's at 7 p.m. Okay, so I should be able to watch it. It's just a night game. Good. I definitely will be watching that after the Carolina-Missouri game. Notable games besides Bama include road games to Arkansas and Texas A&M, which if they win, that just knock the rest of the SEC West down. I like LSU at 18. I think the win against Ole Miss was definitely a statement. You could argue Ole Miss just finally got beat that one time, but I think LSU's a good team. I will admit I was wrong. I think they're a good team. Number 19, the Kentucky Wildcats, 5-2. Before I clown you, I'm just gonna say I feel bad for you because you have a tough stretch coming up with a road game to number 3 Tennessee and a home game to number 1 Georgia. That's brutal. You're going 5-4. I'm sorry, you're going 5-4. There's no way. I just don't see you guys pulling out a win either way. Even considering an upset could be possible, I just don't see it. Kentucky is mediocre without their quarterback, Will Levis. Now, I've heard plenty of arguments. Oh, no. Will Levis, if he was playing in the game, Carolina would have won. He's a great player. Kentucky's not bad. It's just because Will Levis was out. Out of all the teams to complain about that too, South Carolina's not the one. 7-6 last year with a graduate assistant, a quarterback who played at St. Francis, which I'm pretty sure is an FCS school, an injured Luke Doty, who definitely could not pass last year, and then DeCarrion Joyner for the last game, who hasn't played a quarterback since high school and was a wide receiver all through college so far. So don't even try that argument. One problem is they have 12 turnovers, which is 95th nationally. But their offense does average 25.7 points per game, which is 76, and defensive points per game allowed is 19.2, which is 15th. So I'll give it to them there. The defense is coming around again. They're starting to gel back together. And Will Levis has passed for 1,635 yards for 13 touchdowns and 5 interceptions. Is he the first-round draft pick? I saw him this year. As people saw him this year, I still think he could be first round, second round, but he's not as hyped as what people thought him out to be at the beginning of the year. Chris Rodriguez Jr. has ran for 395 yards and 3 touchdowns this year. I think he was injured. For a while. I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure I read something saying he was injured for a while, so I don't blame it for the low stats. The defense is led by linebackers such as DeAndre Square, 52 tackles and 1 interception, Jordan Wright, 33 tackles and 1 interception, and Jaquez Jones, 31 tackles and 1 interception. Wow, they all have 1 interception. That's pretty good. Notable games left this season include home games against Vanderbilt and number 1 Georgia, as well as road games to Missouri and number 3 Tennessee. Do I think they should be number 19 in the country? No. I could see them being top 25 or at number 20, but I just don't see them being past that. And now it's finally time for me to clown you guys. What happened? I believe right before SEC Media Days, we wanted to make a video with turn your swag on with Soulja Boy, and then you guys, I believe Mark Stoops said, you can put on some stupid glasses and dance a silly dance to a stupid song, but that's just your climate. Changing his culture is at its core. You want to talk about your culture? I'm pretty sure through the past few seasons when you've been head coach for a while now, Every time you lose your first game, you go on a 1 or 2 losing streak after that. You want to talk about that? No, yeah, that's what I thought. That's what I thought. Where's your culture helping you right now? Number 20, the Cincinnati Bearcats, 6-1. They've definitely faded from the spotlight. That's obvious. They're not the number 4 team that played better than I expected against Alabama last year. Their lone loss was to Arkansas, who was in the top 10 at the time before they decided to fade out of existence as well. Last week, they definitely escaped some sloppy play. They escaped SMU with a win, 29-27. They cannot be playing like that in the weeks to come. Ben Bryant returned for 200 yards, throwing for 200 yards after a concussion 2 weeks ago. So Cincinnati fans are probably glad to see him back. His stats are 1,761 yards for 15 touchdowns and 6 interceptions. Running back Charles McClelland has ran for 631 yards for 6 touchdowns, with running back Corey Kiner running for 5. Offensive points per game is 32.5, which is 32nd, and the defensive points per game allowed is 24, which is 45th. Defense has been led by players like linebacker Ivan Pace Jr. with a whopping 71 tackles. Wow, 71. And safety Javon Hicks, 33 tackles and 2 interceptions. That's a good linebacker you got right there. Notable games left include a home game against East Carolina, number 20, 3-2 Tulane, as well as a home game next week against UCF, which will be a huge factor to see if they make the AAC championship for the 3rd consecutive time in a row. Final thoughts on their rankings. I think number 20 is a good spot. I think you could arguably put them above Kentucky. Heck, I think you could put them at I don't know if you could put them at 18, but I think you could put them at 19. I think you could switch Kentucky, Cincinnati, definitely. Number 21, North Carolina Tar Heels, 6-1. I did not expect them to be 6-1 this year. Definitely, Mac Brown's doing good, and that quarterback is insane. But I'm about to talk about him right now. Drake May is coming off a career-high 380 passing yards against Duke last week when they won 38-35. Freshman quarterback, May, he's a freshman, surprisingly, has thrown at least 284 yards in all 7 games and has at least 3 touchdowns in the last 5 games. If he goes at this rate and continues to get better and nothing bad happens, he's going to be a first-round pick. Arguably number one quarterback. This is stupid good talents. Drake May has thrown for 2,283 yards. I forgot that's how much he put. 24 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. I think he has the highest yards right now on this entire list. I don't think anyone has more than him. That's absolutely crazy. I think he has 2 years more to develop. Interesting. May also leads the team in rushing with 378 yards for 3 touchdowns, so he's a dual-threat quarterback. But running back Omarion Hampton is not far behind with 345 yards for 6 touchdowns. They're 10th in offensive points per game at 39.3, and they're 110th with defensive points per game allowed, 33.8. They better fix their defensive problems fast, that's all I'll say. They better fix it if they want to make that ACC championship. The defense is led by players such as linebacker Cedric Gray, 73 tackles, that's crazy, and linebacker Power Eccles, 66 tackles, once again, crazy. Notable games left this year include many conference games, mainly a home game against number 24 NC State and a road game against number 10 Wake Forest in 3 weeks. I like North Carolina at number 21. I don't have a problem with them. Closer and closer to Carolina. Number 22, Kansas State Wildcats, 5-2. Kansas State's an interesting team. Very interesting. I like him so far. I think you could arguably put him higher than number 22, but I mean the teams above them are good, so I'll give the teams above them credit. Coming off a loss to number 8 TCU, which was a tough loss for them, and quarterback Adrian Martinez was injured early and his status remains unknown. That definitely, I feel bad for you guys right now because I don't know what's going on with him. They're 63rd in offensive points per game right now, 27.7, and they're tied for 35th with defensive points per game allowed, which is 23. Running back Deuce Vaughn has 744 yards for 4 touchdowns. His workload could increase more than that now that Martinez in the passing game is out, as far as we know. Defense is led by key players such as linebacker Austin Moore, 50 tackles and 1 interception, safety Kobe Savage, 43 tackles and 2 interceptions, and safety Josh Hayes, 40 tackles. Next week is a big game against number 9 Oklahoma State, which could decide an early lead on who will play in the Big 12 championship, arguably against TCU. Speaking of TCU, they've both had their one loss against TCU. And notable games other than Oklahoma State include home games against Texas and rival Kansas, as well as a road game to Baylor. Number 23, Tulane Green Wave. Tulane's definitely good this year. I like Tulane. Their offensive points per game is 42nd with 31, and their defense is 17th with 19.8 points per game allowed. Quarterback Michael Pratt has thrown 1,718 yards for 12 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. Excuse me. Running back Ty J. Spears has ran for 588 yards for 9 touchdowns. They have a very solid defense led by linebackers Dorian Williams, 58 tackles and 1 interception, and Nick Anderson, 56 tackles. Safety Larry Brooks also has 46 tackles and 2 interceptions, and Macon Clark, yeah, I got his name right. 41 tackles and 2 interceptions are both keeping the secondary locked down well for them. They're coming off a win against Memphis, 38-28, and notable games left this season include a home game against SMU and UCF, as well as road games against Tulsa, number 20, Cincinnati. I think it's a 3-way race right now between Tulane, Cincinnati, and UCF. If I had to pick 2, I think I'd pick Cincinnati and Tulane right now. No disrespect to UCF, I think they're a good team. They're still in the title race, obviously, like I mentioned. Tulane, I think I like them at number 23 right now. I think you could arguably put them above. I feel like you could put them. I feel like all these teams above them are good, but then Tulane's good too. Their record's good, but I would put them higher if I could, but I just don't know where I'd put the other teams. Number 24, NC State Wolfpack, 5-2. NC State's definitely. I don't think they'll be in the top 25 at the end of the season. I think they'll be far from it. Losing Devin Leary to a torn pectoral? Yeah, torn pectoral definitely hurt him. I feel bad for him, honestly. Prayers to his family and as him. I hope his recovery goes well. But this season, though, they've been 92nd in points per game with 22.8, and they're 15th in points per game allowed, which is 19.2. Backup quarterback Jack Chambers is thrown for 208 yards and 1 touchdown and 0 interceptions, which I think he'll be the starter from all the quarterbacks. So hopefully he steps up to the plate, which I don't think he really has against. I don't think he did against Syracuse. Running back duo Jordan Houston and Demi Sumo both have a combined 603 yards and 3 touchdowns. I think they'll get more of a workload as the season continues. But their defense, who is 15th in points per game allowed right now, has a great linebacker core with players such as Drake Thomas, 50 tackles, Peyton Wilson, 42 tackles, Isaiah Moore, 40 tackles. Also, cornerback Derek Pitts Jr. has 31 tackles and 4 interceptions. That is a lot of picks. Props to Derek Pitts Jr. ACC championship game is out of sight, but ending as a top 15 is possible. Will I think they do it? No. I'm going to be blunt, no. But it's possible. There's always a chance. There's always a chance. For you NC State fans, there's always a chance, but I don't think you will. Notable games include home games against Virginia Tech. I think you could win. But number 10, Wake Forest, as well as road games number 21, North Carolina. I think you'll lose both of those, and Louisville is a toss-up. Number 25, South Carolina Gamecocks, 5-2. They saved the best for last. I think this is the first time we've been on a 4-game win streak since 2013, and the first time we've been ranked since 2018. So, as a Carolina fan, I can tell you, Beamer ball is through the roof right now. SC, we're on a momentum. The thing about SC is, though, I feel like we're not a dominantly good team or bad team. We either get upsetted or upset teams, which I'm afraid could happen against Missouri or Vanderbilt or Florida as the weeks come on. I hope Beamer can keep the morale high, of course, but don't let their egos get inflated. I definitely hope that doesn't happen. That's my biggest worry at the moment. Offensive points per game, though, is 30.3, which is 47th. and defensive points per game is 63rd in the country with 27.3. Their offensive line is improving, and one thing I'd like to say is beginning of the season, I will admit, offensive line was terrible. But as Shane Beamer has repeatedly said, we're a week-by-week team. We get better every single week. The running back room is one thing I want to talk about. Christian Beal-Smith, CBS, Marshawn Lloyd, Juju McDowell, all the great players. I think our run game's our strongest thing, and Marshawn Lloyd's an absolute beast. He's my favorite player on that team right now. Spencer Rattler, I think he's become more of a manager than a playmaker at SC. Definitely. I think a playmaker, I feel like playmakers are either good or you're bad. I feel like Oklahoma, he did collapse a little. There's reasons why I think it was mostly Lincoln Riley, if you ask me, but there's always a little bit of blame on Rattler. But I still like Rattler. He's definitely been a manager this year. Wide receiver and tight end blocking, though, I forgot to mention, is great at this run game. These blocks have been absolutely vital to our run game. Spencer Rattler this season has thrown 1,466 yards for 5 touchdowns and 8 interceptions. It's a terrible stat, but a lot of his throws to wide receivers were tipped, which caused the defense to intercept it, so I don't blame him. I believe there was a play against Texas A&M just last week, which we won. First win against Texas A&M ever, which is pretty. I'm so happy right now. I believe he dropped. I believe it would have been like a 50, 60-yard touchdown, but it is what it is. Running back Marshawn Lloyd, like I've said, has ran for 526 yards and 9 touchdowns. But running back trio, Lloyd, CBS, or Christian Beal-Smith, and McDowell have all ran for 15 touchdowns and 749 yards. I feel like we definitely split the yards. I feel like if we all gave him the Lloyd, for example, he'd have a lot more yards, but I like how we split it. I like it as in a sense that the defense has to learn what to do against multiple running backs, but at the same time, I feel bad that one player is kind of getting his potential, cut down, you could say, stat-wise. The defense did play better against Texas A&M. Defensive back Darius Rush had an interception, and defensive tackle Tonka Hemingway had 1 fumble recovery. Defensive back Nick Emanwari, who is a freshman, still leads the team in tackles with 43 tackles. Linebacker Sherrod Green, 37 tackles and 1 interception, and Jordan Birch, 34 tackles, are playing pretty well. Beamer ball. I'm going to talk about Beamer ball. That special teams is great. I believe we're leading the country in punts blocked and just special teams in general. One example is that first play of the game, Xavier Legette 100-yard kickoff return. I think once that happened, I think we kind of knew how the game would settle itself out. But we were up 17-0. Now, one thing I've noticed this season is that we'd be up by a lot. I think we did the same Kentucky, Kentucky, A&M. They had these past few games where we'd be up by a lot, and then they'd come back, and then be a close game again. Like last play of the game, or third to last, actually. Sorry. A&M recovered an onside kick. They had an incomplete pass, and then they had a pass that got knocked out by one of the defensive linemen. I can't exactly recall. But it was close. They could have won the game if they somehow made it that Hail Mary. Bowl game is very possible. We just need one more. And the next 3 games are winnable. We have We have a home game against Missouri. We could win that. Away game at Vanderbilt. We can win that. I think I'm going to be objective. I'm going to be as objective as possible. I think we could win the next 2. That'd put up at 7. I think Florida's a 50-50. I'm going to be positive, of course. I'm going to say yes, it's 8. And then Tennessee and Clemson. Like I've said with a lot of other teams, upsetting like Penn State and Ohio State, it's possible to upset, but I would be shocked. I would be absolutely shocked. I don't think we will. Objectively speaking, as a Carolina fan, I always have to go for my Gamecocks. They're going to beat Clemson this year. Maybe I'm being a little too positive right now. Excuse me. I'm just really happy for my Gamecocks. Wow, we've had a long video today, but thank you for listening to, hopefully, if you made it through the whole video, thank you to listening for first downs, fourth downs, and touchdowns today. I know this was a long video, and I'm practically out of breath, and I'm a little tired, so You guys have a great day. Make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell for more videos like this, and make sure to like the video and share it. Have a great day. Go Gamecocks.